Hi, my name is Mark and I teach economics. The purpose of this video is to look at Adam Smith and self-interest, but we're going to look at it in a way that no other person on the web tells you, because everybody's telling you, yes, Adam Smith, self-interest, capitalism, and that's pretty much it. And then they just regurgitate this over and over, recycle the same information. But this really is an examination of what is Adam Smith's self-interest? What does it actually mean? And to understand that is the difference between enlightened self-interest and selfishness. So Adam Smith has a famous quote, and he says, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." And that's Adam Smith and his famous quote that everybody says we should all be acting on our self-interest because society as a whole will benefit in capitalism, etc., blah, blah, blah. But really, what this is saying is you shouldn't be selfish. It says you should act on activities which you find beneficial to yourself and enjoyable, but also will benefit society as a whole. And to understand this, we have to take a step back. How far back? Way back. We have to go all the way back to Socrates and Plato. Because remember, Adam Smith was a moral philosopher, a classical philosopher. He studied the classics. And his understanding of the world was not based on our understanding of the world. Plato had a very interesting story, the myth of Gyges. And this was the story about if you put a ring on your finger, you could disappear. And the reason he created this story, this metaphor, was that he has a very famous quote. And the quote is, in the Republic, 360b through d, he says, "For all men believe in their hearts that injustice is far more profitable than the individual acting on justice." I mean, intuitively, don't you believe this a little bit, that the person who lies, cheats, and steals to their own advantage is more profitable? And so Plato disagrees. Plato creates this myth that if you put this ring on, you become invisible, so you can do any action in the world without suffering the consequences. You want to rob a bank? You can rob a bank. You put your ring on your finger, nobody will ever know you did it. But he says, ultimately, the person who uses this ring to abuse the power of the ring will be enslaved by his lower appetites, while the person who remains virtuous will be happy. And he believes the just man or the good man will create and do the same actions with the ring or without the ring. And so there we have it. We have this idea of justice. And Thomas Aquinas started studying economics, and he was also concerned with the idea of a just society. We're not striving for an equal society or a total libertarian free society. We're studying and striving for a just society. And Adam Smith understood this. In his book, Wealth of Nations, it was mostly about the economics of free trade and capitalism. However, he also wrote another book. It was his first book and his last book in a sense, because he revised it all throughout his life, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it really discussed what is it to be a moral human being in our society. And if you take the understanding of Adam Smith's self-interest quote within the context of the whole of all of his writings, then you understand that he wasn't talking about self-interest as selfishness. He was talking about enlightened self-interest. He was a philosopher of the Enlightenment. And this is the core behind him. Now, Ayn Rand, a philosopher of the last century, somewhat nihilistic to say the least, and had a distaste for Aquinas, the classics and classical philosophy and economists, and really promoted this virtue of selfishness. And the followers of Ayn Rand kind of use her works as almost like biblical text, and they like to quote it, and they get a lot of juice from feeling very self-righteous about, yes, this is the way. But this is in stark contrast to Adam Smith's understanding of enlightened self-interest. For example, I am not going to cut down the last tree on earth to consume one more cheeseburger, because that is not enlightened action. And some people may argue that there's no such thing as a true altruist, but I believe there is, because our actions define us. Whether we are going to sell tobacco products or make X-rated movies, which may be both profitable and legal, or we will set up a school to help children that may be, or let's say to coach chess or to create a game app. These actions define us. I'm not going to do those first activities because it's not enlightened, in my opinion. It's not helping society as a whole. So the difference really is, why are you doing these actions and what are the actions? This is enlightened self-interest. And Adam Smith's enlightened self-interest will raise society to a greater level, and people will benefit in ways in which governments, social engineers, and philosophers could ever envision. And that's the difference. So the next time you hear a critic of capitalism and say, oh, Adam Smith, his self-interest, it's all selfishness, and it will bring to ruin, it ruins our virtue, counter them and start to quote him, understand this theory of moral sentiment and his wealth of nations and what he really means there. And that is his greatness. Adam Smith and enlightened self-interest. Thank you very much.